He could not be killed. Every weapon missed, every blade turned, the only man on the field no one could touch. And he chose to die, not by accident, not by ambush. He walked toward the thing that would kill him with his eyes open. You've been told the heel was the weakness. It wasn't. The heel was just where the story ended. The real weakness had been operating for years before any arrow was fired, and you carry the same one. Homer didn't write a war story, he wrote a psychology. The Iliad opens not with battle, with rage. The very first word in the Iliad is menis, rage, not courage, not glory, rage. That rage isn't an emotion Achilles happens to feel. It is the lens through which he processes everything: honor, war, loyalty, his own worth. Agamemnon takes his war prize, a slave woman named Briseis, a small thing by most measures. Achilles doesn't fight back, he does something more dangerous. He withdraws. He sits in his tent while his companions die. Greeks fall by the hundreds. He does not move. This is the part of the story that matters. Not the heel, this. Because what Achilles is doing inside that tent is something you recognize. You've done it. Maybe you're doing it right now. He is punishing the world by removing himself from it and calling it dignity. The ancient Greeks had a concept for this structure. They called it time, personal honor. And for Achilles, it was not a value. It was his identity, not something he had, something he was. When Agamemnon stripped that prize away, he didn't insult Achilles. He erased him. In his own mind, Achilles ceased to exist as a person. That is the mechanism, and it has a modern name. Psychologists call it identity-contingent self-worth. Your sense of self doesn't just depend on your performance. It is your performance. When the performance is questioned, when recognition is withdrawn, and the self doesn't just feel threatened, it collapses. And the only thing that feels like survival is either dominating the situation or leaving it entirely. Achilles can't dominate Agamemnon, not without destroying the whole alliance, so he leaves. Think about the last time you withdrew from something after a public slight, a meeting, a group, a project, a relationship. You told yourself it was a principled stand. Maybe it was, but notice the feeling underneath the principle. The feeling of being canceled, of ceasing to exist in the eyes of the room. That feeling is not weakness. Every human has it. The weakness is in what you do next. Because Achilles, sitting in that tent, makes a specific decision, he asks his mother, the sea goddess Thetis, to persuade Zeus to punish the Greeks. Let that land. He asks a god to let his own allies suffer, so they will feel how much they need him. This is what identity-contingent self-worth looks like at its extreme. It doesn't just want validation, it will engineer suffering to get it. You've seen this. You may have done it, withholding your effort, your presence, your warmth, waiting to be asked, waiting for the world to come to the tent. And sometimes the world does come. Agamemnon sends envoys with gifts. Achilles refuses them. The gifts are enormous. The apology is real. He says no. Why? Because accepting them would mean the wound heals. And if the wound heals, what is he? Just a man in a war, and that is unbearable to someone whose identity is built on being exceptional. This is the trap inside identity-contingent worth. It requires constant reconfirmation. The last win is already dead. Recognition given is immediately insufficient. Recognition withheld is catastrophic. There is no stable ground. The philosopher Hannah Arendt wrote about what happens when a person's public identity collapses. She called the resulting state worldlessness, the experience of no longer being real to others and therefore no longer real to yourself. Achilles is worldless in that tent, not because his world is gone, but because the people who validated it stopped looking. The Greeks keep dying, the Trojans push to the ships, the war is almost lost, and he still doesn't move. Ask yourself, have you ever watched something you cared about deteriorate rather than act, because acting would mean letting go of the grievance? The grievance has become the identity. Abandoning it feels like self-erasure. Then Patroclus comes to him, his closest companion, his other self, some scholars argue. Patroclus says, "Let me go. Give me your armor. I'll fight in your name. Let me be you on the field, even if you won't go." And Achilles agrees. He sends his best friend into battle wearing his identity. Think about what that means. He will let someone else be him rather than be him himself. The ego has calcified so completely it can no longer move. Patroclus dies. Hector kills him, and the armor, Achilles' armor, is stripped from his body. The grief that breaks from Achilles now is not the grief of a man who lost a war prize. It is something underneath all of it. He screams, he tears at himself, he covers his face in ash, and then something shifts. Something cracks open in him that the withdrawn, grievance-guarding Achilles never allowed. He stops caring about Agamemnon. He stops caring about the prize, the slight, the validation. He cares only about Patroclus. This is the pivot point of the whole story. Grief burns out the ego the way fire burns out the rot in old wood. And now Achilles becomes the thing he always claimed to be, not a man performing in vulnerability, a man who no longer cares whether he survives. His mother tells him outright, "If you kill Hector, you die shortly after." He says he knows. He chooses glory and death over survival and obscurity. He always said he would, but before Patroclus died, he wasn't choosing, he was hiding. The difference between a principled choice and self-destruction is this. One comes from knowing who you are. The other comes from needing others to tell you. Achilles in the tent needed the Greeks to look back. Achilles going to face Hector doesn't need anything from anyone. That distinction is everything. Now, where does this live in your life? Not the mythology, the mechanism. You have a domain, work, parenting, a creative practice, a social circle. Somewhere you have built your sense of self. Now imagine someone in that domain dismisses you, ignores your contribution, gives the credit to someone else. Notice what happens next inside you, the specific quality of it, the heat. If what you feel is proportionate, frustration, desire to correct the record, a brief sting, that's a healthy self. If what you feel is catastrophic, erasure, fury that doesn't pass, the need to make the other person feel the cost, that's the tent. The question isn't whether you have this. You do. Everyone does. The question is how far in you are. One signal, you find yourself unable to let a slight go even when the practical cost of holding it is clear. The Greeks are dying. You know they're dying. And you do not move. Another signal, you need the recognition before you give the effort, not after. This is different from wanting acknowledgement. This is requiring it as a precondition. The work waits on the applause. Third signal, you can't absorb the success of someone in your domain without measuring it against yourself. Their win registers as your loss. You can't separate the ledger. Achilles didn't want to be the best. He wanted to be incomparably, unignorably, cosmically first. Nothing else registered. The philosopher Simone de Beauvoir described a version of this, the person who defines freedom as domination rather than expression, who can only feel free when no one else is free ahead of them. That isn't freedom. It's a cage built to look like a throne. Now, what do you do with this? The answer is not to stop wanting recognition. That would be a lie. Recognition is not the enemy. Letting recognition become your ontology, your very ground of being, is the enemy. The Stoics had a word for this. They called the problem proairesis, the faculty of choice. And they said the only thing you can actually own is how you direct it, not how others respond to you, not how the room reads you, how you direct your will. The Stoics weren't saying don't feel the slight. They were saying don't let the slight become your location. Achilles let the slight become his location. He set up camp in the wound. And because he set up camp there, he was absent when it mattered. His absence cost Patroclus his life. Your absence, when you're in the tent, has costs too. Name them specifically. What relationship has deteriorated while you waited for an apology that might never come? What project has stalled because it wasn't acknowledged first? What version of yourself has been sitting in the tent, refusing to enter the field? Here is what Achilles teaches you. The thing that finally moved him was not resolution. It was loss. He didn't choose to leave the tent because he healed. He left because something he loved was gone and the tent no longer contained anything. You do not have to wait for a loss that size. That is the point. That is what the story is for. The grief that broke Achilles open is available to you before the catastrophe. It's called honest accounting. Ask yourself, if I hold this grievance for another year, what specifically will be gone? Answer that question as if Patroclus is already on the ground, because in your life, he is heading there. The heel itself, what does it mean? In the myth, Thetis dips the infant Achilles in the river Styx to make him invulnerable. She holds him by the heel. That one point remains mortal. The heel is the part his mother couldn't protect. Because she was holding it, the love was the vulnerability. Your heel is not a physical thing. Your heel is the part of your self-image that you refuse to let reality touch, the part you held back from the water. It might be your intelligence, your taste, your creative worth, your status in a particular room. The thing you've decided cannot be questioned, and because it cannot be questioned, it cannot grow. The invulnerable part is the frozen part. The heel is not the body part the arrow hit. It's the part of yourself you never let touch the real world, and therefore never tested, never toughened, never made real. The way to find your heel: find the criticism that makes you go cold, not angry. Cold, the one you dismiss fastest. That dismissal, that speed, that coldness is the location. Whatever you're defending that fast is whatever you haven't tested. Achilles died because Paris's arrow hit the one spot his mother held back from the water. You survive by choosing to submerge the heel yourself, by choice, before any arrow comes. The real weakness of Achilles was never the heel. It was the refusal to be ordinary long enough to become extraordinary on his own terms, without the crowd, without the confirmation, without the war. You don't need to wait for a Patroclus to die. You don't need a war. You need to walk out of the tent today, not because you've been asked, because the field is there.